Ethan had always loved space. From the moment he was a child staring at the night sky, he dreamed of traveling to distant worlds. So when he was chosen for a deep space mission, he felt proud and ready. He was trained in engineering, survival, and quick thinking, but nothing could prepare him for what awaited him beyond the stars. The mission had been routine, exploring an uncharted sector of space, scanning planets, and collecting samples. But when Ethan's ship passed through a strange nebula, alarms started blaring. The sensors went wild. Before he could even react, a massive beam of light enveloped his ship. In a blink, he was no longer in his ship. When he opened his eyes, he was inside a colossal chamber, unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls glowed with a soft, pulsating light, and strange symbols floated in the air. The air itself felt alive, humming with energy. Standing before him on a raised platform was a being of unimaginable power, the alien Queen Lyra. She was tall, elegant, and terrifying all at once. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, and her eyes glowed with an intense, violet light. Her voice when she spoke was both beautiful and commanding. "You are far from home, human," she said, her tone calm but filled with authority. "You have entered the domain of the Zinari, and for that, you will serve me." Ethan's heart pounded. "Serve you? I don't even know who you are," he stammered. "I am Queen Lyra, ruler of this system," she replied. "Your fate is to be my slave." The word slave made Ethan's stomach drop. He had trained for danger, but this was unlike anything he had imagined. Yet even as fear gripped him, a spark of defiance ignited inside him. Humans had survived countless challenges before. He would not break easily. Over the next few days, Ethan was introduced to the palace and the strict routines imposed by the queen. He learned that every Zinari had a role and obedience was expected above all else. The palace was a marvel of alien technology, machines that seemed alive, halls that shifted and changed, and lights that responded to thought. Ethan observed it all with careful eyes, trying to understand their ways, but he also noticed cracks in the system. The advisors whispered among themselves, worried about the queen's decisions. Some were dissatisfied with her leadership, secretly plotting and scheming. Ethan realized that Lyra's control was not absolute. There were vulnerabilities he could see, even as a newcomer. Despite being a slave, Ethan's mind refused to stop working. He began quietly helping the staff, fixing small problems, with machinery, suggesting improvements that made their work easier. He never openly challenged the queen, but his clever solutions did not go unnoticed. The palace staff began to admire his intelligence and resourcefulness. Lyra, for her part, watched him closely. She had conquered many species, yet this human was different. He did not tremble before her, did not beg or plead. He observed, analyzed, and acted with quiet confidence. It intrigued her. One evening, she summoned him to her private chambers. The room was vast, filled with soft, glowing light and floating platforms that hovered silently. Lyra's gaze was intense. "You are bold, human," she said. "Most of your kind would collapse in fear, yet you do not. Tell me, why do you not obey as expected?" Ethan swallowed. "I obey when it is fair," he said cautiously. "But I will not lose my mind or my dignity just because someone demands it." Lyra tilted her head, studying him. "Interesting. You are unlike any human I have encountered. Perhaps there is more to you than I thought." From that moment, Ethan realized he had a chance. Not to escape yet, but to understand, to learn, and to survive. He began observing more carefully, noting the queen's routines, the palace's security, and the politics among the Zinari. Every detail could be important, every moment an opportunity. Even as he adapted to his new life, Ethan refused to let fear dominate him. He exercised in the palace gym, practiced engineering puzzles, and observed the stars beyond the palace windows. He reminded himself that humans had a unique strength, ingenuity. And sometimes thinking differently was more powerful than sheer force. Lyra, meanwhile, became more curious, She started to test Ethan, presenting him with challenges designed to push him to his limits. Some were mental puzzles, others required clever manipulation of the alien technology. Each time, Ethan managed to find a solution, not by brute force but by using logic, creativity, and observation. The Queen found herself intrigued and, in a way, impressed. She had expected fear, panic, and weakness, but this human had none of that. His mind was sharp and his spirit unbroken. One day, as Ethan completed yet another task she had set for him, Lyra asked quietly, "How do you do it, human? How do you remain calm when everything here should terrify you?" Ethan paused, thinking. "Because I know fear won't save me," he said simply. "Thinking clearly will. And humans have always survived when the odds are impossible." Lyra's eyes softened slightly, an expression unfamiliar on her stern face. For the first time she considered that perhaps this human could teach her something, or even challenge her in ways that no other being had. As the first days turned into a week, Ethan understood one thing clearly. He was a prisoner, yes, but he was not powerless. His mind, his courage, and his ingenuity were his weapons. And even in the shadow of the alien queen, he could find ways to survive. And perhaps one day to influence the one who ruled him. Hook for Part 2. Ethan notices subtle cracks in the palace system and realizes that the queen, for all her power, faces hidden threats. He begins to quietly plan how he might use his intelligence to survive and even gain influence without crossing the line that could end his life immediately. Ethan quickly realized that surviving in the queen's palace required more than obedience. He had already noticed small cracks in the Zenari system, advisors whispering behind closed doors, guards acting nervously, and machinery that sometimes failed without explanation. For a human, these weaknesses were opportunities, if he could act carefully. He began observing everything in detail. The palace was alive with movement, but patterns emerged. Guards followed strict routines, censors had blind spots, and advisors often repeated themselves in their reports. Ethan started mapping it all in his mind like a puzzle. Then he discovered something fascinating. The palace machines, while highly advanced, were predictable. They responded to logic rather than emotion. By understanding their design, Ethan could manipulate them subtly, helping the staff complete tasks more efficiently. He never tried to break the system outright. Instead, he made small improvements that appeared accidental but had significant effects. For example, a delivery drone kept dropping cargo in the wrong location. Most slaves would have complained or panicked. Ethan studied the drone and adjusted its internal logic sequence. The next day it delivered everything perfectly. The staff were amazed, though they did not know who had fixed it. Even the queen noticed the improvement, and her curiosity about this human deepened. Lyra decided to test him further. She summoned him to the command chamber, a vast room filled with holographic projections of the Zenari fleet and the palace itself. "You seem useful," she said. "Yet I wonder, are you clever enough to survive my challenges?" Ethan nodded, keeping calm. "I will do my best, Queen Lyra." She smiled faintly, a gesture rare among her kind. "Your best will not be enough unless you understand the rules." The challenge was simple in theory. A control panel had malfunctioned, threatening to shut down the palace's power system temporarily. Many slaves would panic, try to brute force a solution, and fail. Ethan studied the panel carefully. It required logic, timing, and understanding of alien energy flow, things no human had ever learned. Yet, he reasoned step by step, using deduction and pattern recognition. Within minutes, he rerouted the power safely. Lyra's eyes widened. "Interesting," she said softly. "You do not rely on strength, yet you succeed where others fail. Most humans would have broken the system entirely." Ethan only smiled politely. "Humans rely on thinking," he said. "Sometimes thinking is stronger than force." The queen, for the first time, seemed genuinely curious about him. She began sending small tasks, each more complex than the last. Ethan completed each one, learning more about the palace, its technology, and its politics. With every success, his influence grew, not openly, but quietly. Meanwhile, Ethan began talking with the palace staff. He treated them with respect, helping them solve small problems and listening to their concerns. Slowly, they began to trust him. They shared small hints about the Queen's weaknesses and the unrest among her advisors. Ethan realized that the Zenari society, for all its power, was fragile in ways no human might expect. One evening, while observing the palace from a balcony, Ethan noticed a group of advisors speaking in hushed tones. Their conversation was filled with frustration about Lyra's decisions. Some were plotting to replace her with a more aggressive leader. Ethan's mind raced. If the plot succeeded, it could end his life. But it also meant the Queen was not invincible. He decided to be careful. He could not intervene openly, but he could prepare for opportunities. Humans had a long history of using intelligence and observation to survive dangerous situations, and Ethan intended to follow that tradition. Lyra, aware that she was being watched by her own court, seemed to grow more dependent on Ethan's unique skills. She started asking questions about human logic, reasoning, and creativity. He explained small concepts care. Ethan had been in the palace for several weeks now. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to observe the Queen and her court. Despite being a slave, he felt more alive than he ever had. His mind worked constantly, analyzing the palace's systems, the advisor's behavior, and Lyra's personality. Every detail mattered. One day, while repairing a malfunctioning energy conduit deep in the palace corridors, Ethan overheard a conversation that made him freeze. Two of Lyra's advisors were plotting against her. They spoke in low, hurried tones, unaware that he was listening. They planned to stage a coup, blaming a fabricated disaster on Lyra's decisions, and replace her with a more aggressive leader. Ethan's heart raced. If their plot succeeded, the Queen, along with everyone loyal to her, could be destroyed. But he knew that rushing in would be dangerous. These were clever, high-ranking Zenari, and any human interference could be fatal. He needed a plan. He decided to gather more information first. Quietly, he observed the advisors' meetings, noted their schedules, and learned who else might be involved. He also began subtly testing Lyra's reactions, noting how much she trusted her court and how she responded to potential threats. Every observation was a piece of the puzzle. Then came a new challenge. Lyra summoned him to the council chamber, a circular room filled with holographic screens displaying the palace, the fleet, and the planets under her control. "You are clever, human," she said, her violet eyes fixed on him. "I have watched you solve problems no one else can. But tell me, how do you know what to do when everything is against you?" Ethan thought carefully. "I observe," he said. "I study patterns. I think ahead. Humans survive by thinking, not by ignoring danger." Lyra's expression softened slightly. "Interesting. Perhaps humans are more than fragile creatures after all. Perhaps they can be useful." That night, Ethan devised a subtle plan. He could not reveal the rebellion to Lyra directly. She might suspect he was meddling, but he could find ways to prevent the plot from succeeding. Using his knowledge of the palace systems, he started installing small safeguards. He adjusted communication links, created alert systems, and set up redundancies so that the advisor's plans would fail silently. Days passed. Ethan continued his daily work, maintaining the illusion of obedience while quietly strengthening the Queen's defenses in ways she didn't fully notice. Meanwhile, the advisors grew impatient, frustrated by minor failures and setbacks that Ethan had orchestrated without anyone realizing it. Lyra, observing the small improvements in palace efficiency, began to depend on Ethan more than ever. She started inviting him to strategy meetings, not as a participant but as a consultant. Her interest in his insights grew. He suggested solutions that were small but effective, never undermining her authority but quietly strengthening her rule. One evening, a sudden crisis occurred. An energy surge threatened to overload the palace. Power grid. Guards panicked and advisors argued, unsure how to react. Ethan, remaining calm, analyzed the systems and devised a solution. By redirecting energy flow and stabilizing the circuits, he prevented a disaster that could have devastated the entire palace. Lyra was visibly impressed. "You saved the palace again," she said. "Not with strength, not with power, but with thinking. You are remarkable." Ethan bowed respectfully. "I only do what I can, Queen Lyra." From that moment, a shift began. Lyra started treating him differently, not as a mere slave, but as someone whose judgment she could trust. She began consulting him more openly, and the palace staff noticed the change as well. The human who had arrived as a prisoner was slowly becoming an essential part of the Queen's inner circle. Meanwhile, Ethan continued monitoring the advisors plotting against Lyra. Their frustration grew as their subtle manipulations kept failing. One by one, they were exposed for incompetence or minor treachery, though they did not realize Ethan's role. He used clever, indirect methods, misrouting messages, creating minor delays, and giving the Queen evidence of mistakes, all without revealing himself. One night, as Ethan worked late, Lyra appeared at the balcony where he was observing the stars. "You seem to know more than I expected," she said softly. "I have always ruled through strength and fear, yet you have shown me a new way. Perhaps a human perspective can teach even a queen something." Ethan smiled. "Everyone has something to teach, Your Majesty. Even a human can help, if given the chance." Lyra studied him silently, her glowing eyes reflecting the starlight. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider a world where trust, intelligence, and cooperation mattered more than domination. She realized that Ethan's calm, clever mind had already changed the dynamics of her court. The next day, a formal meeting of the advisors revealed the results of Ethan's unseen interventions. The rebellious faction had made mistakes, exposed themselves, and been quietly reassigned or disciplined. Lyra's rule was not only safe but stronger than ever. She thanked no one publicly, yet the palace staff understood that someone had been working behind the scenes. Ethan watched from the sidelines, a quiet satisfaction in his heart. He was still a slave, but he had become something more, a protector, a strategist, a mind that could rival the Queen's own in solving problems. And in doing so, he had gained a subtle form of power that no one could take away. Lyra, meanwhile, felt an unfamiliar sensation, respect, admiration, and curiosity. She had conquered countless worlds, yet here was a human who had survived her tests, improved her palace, and strengthened her rule. She could see that his loyalty was earned, not forced. And for the first time, she wondered if a partnership, rather than dominance, could be the path forward. Ethan understood the significance of the moment. The palace was still dangerous and he was still a prisoner, but he had achieved something remarkable. He had proven that human ingenuity, patience, and intelligence could influence even the mightiest of alien rulers. Ethan had spent weeks quietly, observing and helping the palace from the shadows. The rebellion of Lyra's advisors had been thwarted without anyone knowing it was his work. For the first time, he felt that his cleverness and calm judgment were making a real difference. But he also knew that staying in the background could only take him so far. To truly protect the Queen and the palace, he would have to act more boldly. It started with a small incident. A section of the palace's defense network began to fail due to a technical glitch. The failure was minor, but it could escalate quickly, leaving the palace vulnerable. Ethan saw that the only way to fix it in time was to take control of the system himself, a risky move that required direct access to the Queen's command center. When he approached Lyra, she was overseeing a training session for new palace recruits. Her glowing eyes met his. "What is it, human?" she asked. Ethan took a deep breath. "There is a malfunction in the defense network. I can fix it, but I need direct access to the control hub. The staff alone won't manage it in time." Lyra studied him for a moment. Most humans would have cowered at such a task, yet Ethan remained calm and confident. "Very well. she said. I will allow it. But be warned, failure is not an option. Inside the control hub, Ethan analyzed the system. It was complex, far beyond any human technology he had encountered, but his mind worked steadily. He traced the problem, isolated the failing circuits, and rerouted power to stabilize the defenses. All the while, he made small adjustments to prevent any future failures. By the time Lyra returned to check on him, the system was fully operational. The Queen's eyes widened in surprise. You have done this flawlessly, she said. Not only have you repaired the problem, but you have improved the network beyond its original design. Incredible. Ethan nodded. I only want to help, Your Majesty. A strong defense protects everyone, including you. For the first time, Lyra saw him not as a mere servant, but as a partner in solving her most critical problems. She realized that his intelligence, calm reasoning, and willingness to act without fear were rare qualities, even among her own people. Over the following days, Ethan began to take a more active role. He advised on minor reforms, helped train recruits in ways that combined human strategy with Zainari discipline, and continued to quietly correct hidden flaws in the palace systems. Lyra, though cautious, started consulting him on decisions that affected the entire court. The Queen's advisors noticed the change immediately. They were wary, some even resentful, that a human, a slave no less, was influencing palace affairs. Yet Ethan's contributions were undeniable. The palace became more efficient, the staff more organized, and Lyra's rule stronger. Even minor disputes were resolved quickly, thanks to his guidance. Ethan also began observing Lyra more closely. Beneath her commanding presence, he saw a ruler who cared deeply for her people. She carried the weight of the entire empire on her shoulders, and not every decision was easy. Her advisors often pressured her to be harsh or ruthless, but Ethan realized she genuinely wanted to do what was best. One evening, he found her alone on a balcony, staring at the stars. He approached cautiously. You have changed the palace, she said quietly without turning to him. Not with force, not with commands, but with your mind. I did not expect a human to be capable of this. Ethan smiled softly. Humans survive by thinking, not by fear. I only apply what I know. Lyra finally looked at him, her glowing eyes meeting his. You have eye trust. Ethan had come a long way from the first day he had been captured by the Queen. From a terrified prisoner, he had grown into a trusted ally. His intelligence, patience, and ingenuity had strengthened the palace, earned him the respect of the staff, and even impressed Lyra herself. But now, a new challenge awaited, not in technology, strategy, or politics, but in the delicate balance of personal trust and partnership. Lyra had begun observing Ethan differently. She no longer saw him merely as a clever human, but as someone whose judgment she valued, and whose presence brought calm to the chaos of her court. Yet there was tension. Lyra was a ruler who had always relied on power and authority. Accepting someone, even a human, as a partner in decision-making required a shift in her perspective. One evening, as the twin moons of the Zainari world rose, in the sky, Lyra summoned Ethan to the royal garden, a serene space filled with glowing plants and gently floating water orbs. The garden was quiet, peaceful, and unlike any part of the palace he had seen before. You have changed this palace, she said softly, and perhaps even me. Ethan bowed respectfully. I only do what I can, Your Majesty. My goal is to help, not to interfere. Lyra studied him for a long moment. I once thought strength alone ruled the universe. I now see that intelligence, calm, and trust are just as powerful. You have taught me that lesson. Ethan smiled faintly. Humans have always survived by adapting, thinking, observing, learning. That is our strength. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to be vulnerable. I want more than just survival. I want partnership, someone I can rely on fully, not as a subordinate but as an equal in council. Could a human be such a partner? Ethan's heart raced. He had never expected to hear such words. "I would be honored, Queen Lyra," he said carefully, "but I am still human. I do not wish to overstep or cause harm. I will follow your guidance and act only with your trust." Lyra's violet eyes softened. "Trust is earned, and you have earned mine. Perhaps we can shape the future together, as partners." From that day forward, Ethan's role in the palace shifted. He was no longer merely a clever advisor or protector. He was now a true partner in planning, decision-making, and problem-solving. Together, he and Lyra began implementing reforms that strengthened the Zenari Empire while maintaining fairness, efficiency, and order. One of their first projects was improving the palace training programs for recruits. Ethan suggested incorporating human techniques of strategy, teamwork, and adaptability alongside the traditional Zenari methods. Lyra agreed, seeing the value in blending human insight with alien discipline. The new program produced a generation of recruits who were both skilled and innovative, earning praise from the Queen's advisors and admiration from the palace staff. But their partnership was not without challenges. Some advisors remained suspicious, wary of a human's influence over the Queen. They whispered behind closed doors, questioning Lyra's judgment and the wisdom of trusting a human. Ethan noticed these whispers but did not confront them directly. Instead, he continued demonstrating value through action, solving complex problems, preventing disasters, and helping Lyra make difficult decisions with confidence. One day, an unexpected crisis arrived from a neighboring system. Rumors suggested that they might challenge the Zenari's influence, testing the strength of the Queen's rule. Lyra turned to Ethan for guidance, her trust in him complete. "What should we do?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with concern. Ethan considered the situation carefully. "We cannot rely solely on power," he said. "We must show strength, yes, but also intelligence, strategy, and foresight. I can help devise a plan that secures our position without unnecessary conflict." Over the next days, Ethan and Lyra worked closely, combining human ingenuity with Zenari knowledge. They mapped the neighboring system's fleet patterns, predicted their movements, and created strategies to prevent escalation. When the potential challenge arrived, they were prepared. The rival system saw the strength and intelligence of the Queen and her human partner, and decided against confrontation, avoiding war entirely. Lyra, impressed and grateful, finally spoke of something she had never shared with anyone. "I have faced countless rulers, conquered many systems, and yet, never have I met a being like you. You have changed how I see humans, and perhaps even how I see leadership itself." Ethan bowed, slightly. "I only do what I can. The rest is up to you, Your Majesty. Together, we make a stronger team than either of us could alone." Their bond grew deeper. In the quiet moments of the palace, they discussed ideas, plans, and visions for the future. Ethan learned more about Lyra's fears and hopes, and she learned more about human resilience and creativity. What had begun as fear and obedience transformed into trust, respect, and mutual admiration. Ethan realized that this partnership was more than survival. It was an opportunity to reshape a civilization. With Lyra's willingness to trust him and his human ingenuity, they could create a society that was stronger, fairer, and more adaptive than any the galaxy had seen before. The palace staff noticed the change too. The Queen, once a distant and untouchable figure, now consulted a human, openly, and the results were evident. Systems ran smoother, decisions were faster and fairer, and the morale of the staff improved. Even the previously skeptical advisors began to respect Ethan, realizing that his intelligence and calm judgment were invaluable. One night, as they overlooked the glowing city from the palace balcony, Lyra spoke quietly. "You were once my prisoner," she said, "and now you are my partner." Strange, isn't it? Ethan smiled, gazing at the stars. Sometimes the strongest relationships are built from the most unlikely beginnings. Lyra nodded, a small, genuine smile on her face. "Then let us continue this partnership, human. Together we can face whatever challenges the universe sends our way. Ethan knew that this was more than a shift in power. It was the beginning of a bond that combined intelligence, courage, and mutual respect. And he understood one important truth: human ingenuity, even in the most alien and powerful of worlds, could not only survive, but thrive. Hook for Part 6. Ethan and Lyra's bond has grown into a strong partnership, blending human intelligence with alien power. The final challenge awaits: consolidating their rule, facing new galactic threats, and proving that their alliance can reshape the Xenari civilization forever. The weeks following Ethan and Lyra's newfound partnership were unlike any period in the history of the Xenari Empire. Together they had already strengthened the palace, neutralized threats from advisors, and prevented war with neighboring systems. But the final challenge loomed: consolidating their rule and ensuring that the entire civilization recognized the value of cooperation, intelligence, and strategy. Ethan spent his days moving between the palace, the command hub, and the city. He continued to refine systems, train recruits, and create strategies that balanced efficiency with fairness. Lyra watched him closely, not only as a ruler observing her human ally, but as someone learning to trust, to adapt, and to see the universe through new eyes. It was during one of these routine inspections that a distant alert came through the palace. Communication network. A previously unknown faction on a remote planet was gathering weapons and attempting to challenge the Queen's authority. Most would have panicked or sent fleets to attack immediately, but Ethan saw an opportunity to apply strategy rather than force. "We cannot rush into this," Ethan said calmly as Lyra reviewed the data. "Attacking blindly could escalate the situation. We need intelligence first. We need to understand their motives, strengths, and weaknesses." Lyra nodded. "Then we will do as you say. Show me your plan." Ethan outlined a multi-step strategy. First, they would send subtle signals, demonstrating the Queen's awareness and technological superiority without direct confrontation. Next, they would intercept communications to learn the faction's intentions. Finally, they would present a proposal for alliance rather than conflict, showing that cooperation would bring more benefit than resistance. The plan required patience, precision, and trust, qualities that had defined Ethan's rise from prisoner to partner. Over the following days, the strategy unfolded flawlessly. Drones monitored the faction's movements, messages were carefully relayed, and negotiations were conducted through intermediaries. By the time the faction realized they were dealing with both the Queen and her human advisor, they were already persuaded to join the Empire peacefully. Lyra watched in awe as the plan succeeded. "You have done it again," she said. "Without bloodshed, without force, yet with complete control. Your mind is extraordinary." Ethan smiled, quietly proud. "I have learned from humans, yes, but also from observing you, Your Majesty. Leadership is not just strength. It is understanding, planning, and careful action." The success solidified their positions. The palace staff now recognized Ethan as an essential part of leadership, and the advisors who had once been skeptical could no longer deny his influence. Even the Xenari citizens began to notice changes. Improved communication, more efficient systems, and a ruler who acted decisively but fairly. Lyra took a moment to reflect. She had conquered countless worlds, but none had challenged her intellect or inspired trust as Ethan had. He had arrived as a human slave, yet through intelligence, courage, and patience, he had become a partner who reshaped the empire itself. As the